Hey everybody,
Hello,
I'm Hob.
I'm Jamie.
And you're watching Dutch and Dragons.
Woo!
Today, we are talking about political-themed role-playing campaigns. But before we get into that, we actually have some questions from Tweak C off of some of our videos. So we're going to go through those real quick, and then we'll move right into our primary topic.
Yep. So, question number 1. What are D&D's limits? And when do you just say, alright, we're playing Legend of the Five Rings rules now. Five Rings rules now. Oh, wow, that's hard, actually.
That's actually really hard to say.
That's actually kind of hard to say.
So Dungeons and Dragons has some limitations, and we've said this, and actually every role-playing game has things that it does really, really well, and some things that it doesn't do so great.
Or at all.
Dungeons and Dragons used to be a phenomenal simulation game. It's actually been dialed way back from that, and now it's very much a kind of surface-level role-playing game. And I say that because it's very much an introductory system now. There's not a lot of great complexity in the system itself. The themes and some of the modules add complexity to it, but predominantly it's a very surface-level simulation game.
You can pick it up and learn to play it in a night.
Or two.
A
night or two, yeah, absolutely.
No, it's super crazy. All right, we're ordering coffee.
1 second, and we're back. So Dungeons and Dragons is something that you can pick up and you can probably learn. At least the 5th edition is something that you can learn in a night or two of gameplay fairly quickly. Now, if you go back to like 3.5 or 3rd edition, 4th edition, those have some greater complexity. 4th edition was very heavy on the simulation aspects and the combat aspects. 3.5 was a much broader system.
I like 3.5.
Massive scope, which also spawned Pathfinder and a whole bunch of other stuff. But I think at some point you have to decide what's actually fun. So if Dungeons and Dragons isn't meeting the needs of your game or of your players, change systems.
It's too simplistic.
Explore other systems. There are hundreds of them out there in all sorts of different forms, and there are many of them that are good at role playing. There are some that are really good at politics. There are some that are really good at like piracy style games.
Volvo does not know how to get his car going.
I see that. Well, it's probably an electric or something. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
it's a Volvo, and they're having difficulties. Oh, it's a manual.
It's a manual. They can't figure out how to get their car going.
The other driver aside, so there are tons of systems out there that may suit your needs better, and I strongly encourage you to explore them.
See, and so then the next question is, what games are good as games outside of the initial interest in lore?
So actually, Tweak C brings one up, mentions one in this question online, and also one prior to this. Legend of the Five Rings is a phenomenal system, both lore and gameplay-wise. The Warhammer role-playing game, both Warhammer Fantasy and the Warhammer 40k, the lore's phenomenal, and the games are phenomenal, and now we're going to get coffee. And we're back.
With coffee.
Coffee.
Ooh, I just spilled some.
That's sort of how it goes.
Yeah.
So, as I was saying, Legend of the Five Rings is a fantastic system, both lore and gameplay-wise. There's the Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k role-playing games, which have a wide amount of lore and some really interesting game mechanics. There are so many out there that I can think of. The Amber role-playing system is a really obscure one that if you can get your hands on it is a really interesting play. It's based off of Roger Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber series. That's part of why it's obscure, and the series is sort of obscure nowadays as well. But a phenomenal series, phenomenal role-playing game. Riffs, Call of Cthulhu. We could go on and on and on and on. 7th Sea, which is actually by John Wick, who is one of the creators of Legend of the Five Rings, is another really phenomenal game system. There's another system out there that he did called Houses of the Blooded, which is predominantly a live-action role-playing game system, but heavily politically themed and really interesting. Lots of Machiavellian politics involved in that. It's a lot of fun to play when you get into it at conventions and that kind of stuff. What else is there? There's Pathfinder. There's Rifts. There's Hero System, which is hyper-complex simulation style role-playing. Should I go on, or have I beat this horse?
You get the idea. There's a lot of them.
If there's something that you really, really like, that you're interested in, more than likely there's a role-playing system out there for it, and I strongly urge you to try them out. If you don't like them, you can always do another one.
That's true.
What's next?
Where do you, as DM, stand about explaining monster/baddie tactics, or traps, and things from your campaigns? So like meta knowledge.
So this question was actually like 4 questions compressed into 2 sentences. And it sort of boils down to out-of-game explanation of how your bad guys or monsters or traps function within the game world to your players. So like Jamie says, meta-knowledge.
Meta-knowledge. My players don't get no meta-knowledge.
Generally speaking, we try to avoid it. There are some things where brokers explanation outside of the game, but the motivations of and the availability of knowledge to your villains, or not so much the motivations, but the availability of information to your villains, you don't really have to go into any explanations for that. Traps? Of your villains. Okay. I may be speaking in weird riddles today. So the motivations of your villains should be apparent to your player characters within the game world. Mm-hmm. The driving factors behind those motivations, your players don't need to know. How they've obtained information, your players don't need to know. I sort of assume that the bad guys or baddies have networks of spies and informants and that kind of stuff in the world, because that's the kind of thing that bad guys do.
Yeah.
Right?
If they have, if there's a specific mechanic that I am, or a house rule that I'm veering away from, let's say I have a specific type of health potion that if my players come across or they can get their hands on that particular health potion, can be used as a bonus action.
Right.
I will explain that to my character, or I will tell them that sort of a thing. Anywhere that my base mechanics of my game are going to move away from what's normal, I might let them know.
If you're deviating from rules as written.
Yeah, if I'm deviating from rules as written, but as far as busting out the monster manual and letting them look up the monsters, no, because
don't look them up on the internet. Don't just because we say the name of it doesn't mean that you should be looking it up. And actually, I try to avoid using monster names for that very reason. I stick to descriptions. Sometimes they'll infer things, but I also mix and match powers and abilities and that kind of stuff to throw it around.
Unless somebody wants to know, well, is this monster a fae or an undead? Because I have advantage against them.
Right. And that's a mechanic exterior to the gameplay that is just knowledge that they need to have so that they can make the correct roll.
Yeah. So that sort of thing I will give them. But for the most part, I don't explain outside of the game the monsters and the motivations they come across in the game. Because that's part of the game.
Yep.
It's like playing a video game when you see the big bad monster over there and you go, oh, that looks mean. I wonder if it's going to kick my ass. And then you go over there and you go, oh, yeah, that totally kicked my ass. So I don't want to give them, and they don't have the little levels above the monsters.
No health bars, no skulls to give indications that this might be a bad idea.
But you don't get that in real life. And as much as I like have players that are really good about shelving their meta knowledge, but it doesn't really matter how good you are at that. It's going to color your gameplay somehow, some way. You could be the very best at shelving meta knowledge, but you still now have a little bit, you have some sort of a compass of what questions do I ask to give my character this knowledge now.
Right.
So, no, I don't normally give any sort of out-of-game explanations.
Right. Next question.
To anything. What makes political game or more role-play heavy games fun? So we're going to move into the box.
This will actually allow us to move into the box, see how we did that.
Yeah,
very clever on our part. So the thing with political and role-play heavy games...
Where did the box? Oh, there it is.
...is that and predominantly politics should be the tapestry on which events hang, so that your game can move, so that your game moves forward. So the politics should not be all about standing around in noble courts and having discussions about how to move armies and that kind of stuff. Your players don't necessarily want to participate in that, and if they do, D&D is not the system to play. No. Trust me. Switch to the one Houses of the Blooded. That's all about standing around in courts and talking. But anyhow, no. So generally speaking, politic-heavy games should use the politics as a tapestry on which all of your events hang. That should be the driving motor for everything that occurs in your game world, and that's how you keep that fun. And then for role-playing heavy games should offer opportunities not just to engage in combat for the purposes of resolving conflict. There should be multiple options. Combat should always be available, but it shouldn't be the only thing available. So, for example, you want to talk about the tea time thing?
Oh, yeah. My players at the moment are in Red and Pleasant Land. And I have this hilarious thing that I've built into it, which is that the people within the Red and Pleasant Land are so very polite that if somebody offers them tea, or someone tells them that it's tea time, they will stop whatever they are doing and have tea with you. So this means they could be fighting a big bad monster and be like, oh, we didn't mean to fight you, we just invited you to tea. And they'll be like, oh, tea. And everybody will sit down and have tea. They could pick up fighting again afterwards or not. It all depends on what goes down during tea time.
Right. So it adds a component into the system that allows you to either interrupt or bypass combat in favor of a role-playing opportunity.
Think of it like when you take a book and you adapt it to film. Books are a wonderful... You could sit down and you can read pages of two characters having an in-depth conversation about what's happening in their world. Mm-hmm. It's super interesting because there are all this conversation and these nuances, and you can read what's going on in the mind of the characters. But if you were to take that exact same scene and put it on the big screen, people would be so bored. Nobody wants to watch 15, 20 minutes of two people sitting in a room
reading email. Nobody wants to.
No. It's just not that interesting.
Right.
It really isn't. So when you start with your political campaign, you definitely don't want it to feel like sitting in a room reading email. You want to have stuff going on, and through the goings on, the political intrigue comes out.
Right.
Time for the box.
All
right. How do you even get started with a politics-heavy campaign?
I think that's funny that's the one that comes out first.
Yeah, that's kind of an amazing thing to have come out first.
So I don't do a lot of politics-heavy campaigns.
I do.
She does.
I do a lot of politically heavy, role-play heavy campaigns. I like to start with murder. I really do.
Murder most foul.
Murder most foul.
So,
I have...
murder is actually a really good way to start. You can start with the invasion of a country. You could start with an assassination. You could start with, we're back to murder again, the invasion of a country.
Start with murder.
The going silent of an outpost on the border between two contested countries. I mean, there's so many ways that you can start a political campaign.
It could be something as innocuous as, hey, a shipment of beet juice has gone missing on the road.
Yep.
I mean, like, it sounds like something that is just totally stupid, and your players are sent out to figure out what happened to the beet juice. But this, like, bizarre, seemingly very small event leads them down this massive rabbit hole of
politics and intrigue.
Yeah.
And
I had that happen in one of my games. They were basically investigating a drug that had popped up in the city all of a sudden and was causing magic users to go crazy. And by the end of it, they found out that there was an evil scientist who was the son of the king who was trying to steal all magic for himself. Like, by the end of it, they were just
embroiled in political bullshit.
Oh yeah, like everybody wanted a piece of this magic, and some people were sided with the son and sided with the king, and yeah, it gets pretty crazy.
Something else that you can do if you want to have a politically charged campaign is have a note delivered to one of your player characters, just one, and have that note seem to be innocuous. And it could be something as simple as it's a message that's coded that they can't decipher.
Not right away.
This particular note is key information for one of the political entities within your game world. And everybody wants it. The good guys, the bad guys, and the in-between guys, they all want this note.
The object is the key to the very powerful thing that everyone's coming after.
What is it, The Man Who Knew Too Little?
Yeah, like The Man Who Knew Too Little, or...
Spies Like Us.
Or you even have, like, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones all starts with a note that gets sent to Kat, and she's like, holy crap, burn the note!
Right.
And then it all just unravels. So,
right. So there you go.
Okay, keep moving. How do you keep political themes in your world moving while the PCs are off doing other stuff? It is very common in political games for your PCs to go chasing rainbows, because they are going to start to see plots and intrigue everywhere, even when there isn't any. Little kid's cat went missing. Well, it must be some sort of super secret government spy cat. Let's go rescue all the cats, just in case the super secret spy cat is important later.
Yes.
It's gonna happen.
All the time.
It will happen
Perpetually.
in a political intrigue.
I mean, it'll happen even if you're not having political intrigue.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Just happen.
Your players will grab onto something that you never saw coming, and you're going to be like,
well, okay then.
You just do. You have to, in your mind, have some sort of time frame for what is going on behind the scenes.
Yep. Basically, the events have to continue no matter what happens. So if your players ignore the broader plot, just like with anything else, there has to be a timer running in the background that says, if they get to X and they haven't done Y, then Z is what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
It has to keep going, unlike video games where the main plot point just sits around and waits for them. They don't have that luxury.
Yeah. Exactly.
If the invading army is set to take the town, maybe the invading army gets the town. And that's fine, because now it creates a problem the players now have to face, which is how to stop the invading army. Okay, next question.
Correctamundo. We're going to do the big one?
Yep, we're going to do the big one. We're going to do the big one, because this, I think, I wanted to hit this before.
Which this one actually it's big because it has answers on it.
We didn't want to forget them.
Yeah.
What do you do when your players or PCs don't understand discretion and stealth in a politically charged Oh, that's 2 questions. You didn't choose them.
Oh, my bad. It's a slightly smaller question.
It's a slightly smaller question. Which is, what things do you need to know prior to starting your politically themed campaign? Well, the thing about discretion and stealth is actually a really easy answer, which is it bites them in the butt.
Slap them in the face with it.
I mean, maybe they get arrested, they weren't being careful. What happens to spies when they're not careful?
You hit them with the stinky fish that they have let sit out in the sun for 4 days.
Yeah, so you just have the consequences. I mean, sometimes that happens.
All right, now last question.
But the things that you should know prior to starting your political campaign, I think it's important to understand how the main political antagonists influence the wider world in the past, present, and future.
Yep.
And I always say this, like, people go, why didn't they just use the time turner and go back in time and kill off Snape? Not Snape, Voldemort. Sorry, guys.
Cool.
I'm really tired. But I mean, but then I go, okay, so think about what would happen if you did take Voldemort out of the Harry Potter universe. Lily Evans doesn't die. There's no death to stop Snape from being a dark wizard. Maybe Snape does become a dark wizard. Harry and Ron might not have become friends, because one of the reasons that
Harry might not have ever been born.
Yeah, one of the reasons that they bond, Harry and Ron, is because Harry knows how Ron feels being picked on and poor.
Yeah.
Hermione wouldn't have been their friend because there is no troll in the dungeon let in by Voldemort to make them be friends. Like, really think about what are the consequences of taking one person out of your world, and if the answer is there aren't any, then you really should be rethinking your political campaign.
I agree. So one of the other things that you should know is how your PCs are connected to the political structure and influencers in your world. So this doesn't necessarily mean that you need that they need to have a direct connection to the political structure or influencers in your world starting out. They could be absolutely, completely, and totally nobodies when things first start out, but somehow they get tangled up in the mess that is the politics of your world, and because of that, they're drawn into and pulled along by the events of the politics in your world, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. And the last thing you should really have an answer for is, how do the political machinations of the influencers impact machinations? That's the word.
Echinacea?
Anyhow, how do they influence the common people in the world and the world atmosphere? So if you're going to have like a depressing kind of end of the world kind of thing, what do they call it? A dystopian. You're going to have a dystopian world. I know, I used up all my brain cells at school, you guys. If you're going to have a dystopian world, then you've got to understand how the people feel about it.
Yeah.
Is it going to be easy for your PCs to whip up the common folk to rebellion? Or do the common folk really do believe that this is the best thing that's ever happened to them and their leaders are wonderful and they can't see the oppression?
Yeah. Yeah. So those are the things that you should know.
Yep.
That's all we have time for today. The rest of the questions that we have will go into the leftovers box. And thank you very much for joining us. If you enjoy what we're doing, if you enjoy what we're doing, or if you don't, please subscribe, watch our videos anyways. We love you. It doesn't matter if you hate watch us. It's okay.
He does.
I mean,
he loves you. I think you're a jerk. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, now you're just being mean. Anyhow, so if you like what we're doing, click like and subscribe down below. Make sure that you click the bell so that you get notifications about our videos. If you have questions, comments, anything that you'd like to see in our videos, also leave them in the comments below, and we will add them to our videos. And other than that, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Have fun storming the castle!
Wait, it's Sunday. Never mind. Enjoy your week. Bye!
Bye!